All right. So everyone hates. I hate back-to-back meetings, and I appreciate all you guys sitting over here this morning. And I promise security. All of these security slides, we have a lot of memes, so you're gonna get to enjoy all these fun memes that we have placed over here for you folks. It's typically very hard to talk about security in general. Just gonna talk about very high level 10,000 foot overview of what we have been doing. And by show of hands, can you guys show if you have any security integrated with your pipelines before we start? So very few people. Do you guys operate like regulatory compliance or under regulatory compliance requirements like HIPAA, PCI, SAST? So very few people. So you guys are not mandated to integrate your security into your infrastructure. All right, so the title is Decoupling DevSecOps from CI/CD Pipelines. We are with ADP. We have a couple slides, 20 slides or so. 10 of them are going to be presented by me. The rest are going to be presented by Jeff Woods, my partner in crime. I'm the director of DevSecOps with ADP, and Jeff is principal architect with ADP. We are DevSecOps at ADP.com. So disclaimer, opinions expressed in this presentation are our own and not necessarily those of our employer, just so you guys know. So very quickly, I have been in this space since 1994, Linux from scratch user, have been delivering speeches, talks in a lot of Eastern European, mostly countries, Russia, Lithuania, Turkey, and States. Have been over here for 20 years. I'm the chief architect for Turkish Navy's cybersecurity solution, a NATO country still. And I just want to give stage to Jeff for himself.
So Jeff Woods, I've been tinkering Linux since 1993. Anybody remember SLS? There we go, one guy way in the back. Spent most of my career working as a developer. Disclaimer, I do still identify as a developer. I might say some mean things today about development, but it's all in improving the practice, right? About 5 years ago, I started moving into the security domain, right? Because I realized that security was more important than most developers give it treatment for. Contact information up on the board there, so I'm not going to read it all.
So, since we have been in this space for a very long period of time, we have come to realize that there are anti-patterns brewing right under plain sight, inside the umbrella of DevOps, DevSecOps. So the title of this presentation is, as you know, is Decoupling DevSecOps from CI/CD. And why you might say, why are we decoupling DevSecOps, which everyone is trying to put together automation around security or securing infrastructure? So let's take a look at the couple of good examples of what anti-patterns is, and let's take a look at the definition of what anti-pattern is. Anti-pattern is a common response to a recurring problem that is usually ineffective and highly risk being highly counterproductive. Right? Just gonna look at a couple of those examples that we have come to realize and understand, while looking at the current interpretation of what DevSecOps pipelines are. So this very, very famous pipeline or infinity loop that shows you, this has been around for almost like 10 years by now, what DevOps looks like. So DevOps pipeline or SDLC lifecycle governed by the DevOps pattern is typically a sequential steps that starts with the coding, building, testing, releasing, deploying, operating, and monitoring, and then starts the loop again. That's a kind of classical infinity loop that shows you a waterfall of pipeline. So you might have parallel steps, multi-threaded or parallel execution of those steps in a single pipeline, but that's typically, people typically operate a single pipeline, monolithic pipeline that does everything for you, right? So this was 2000. That was 2012. So in around 2018, 2019, the DevSecOps or SecOps pattern started to emerge. So big enterprises started gently integrating security into their pipelines. Again, single pipeline, but in the middle you have security. This from Gartner. You have this inner loops that you might see over here, monitoring analytics inside, and there are some security-related steps going around it. But security is still like kind of outside the perimeter, kind of outside that pipeline. But it's trying to integrate that with the DevOps or release pipeline. This is version 2019. And here comes 2022. This from Carnegie Mellon University. They do organize DevSecOps days. They are a big DoD shop. So they have been developing this new modern DevSecOps model or infinity loops, which you might see there are a lot of inner circles over here that you have to operate a dev cycle, a loop, an ops cycle, and you have sec, and it's complicated. You have SAST, thread modeling, secure coding, secure config, secure transfer, 50 other things. So security is not that easy, right? Security at its heart is very complicated. It requires specialization on certain area. Integrating that security into a CI/CD pipeline has been a challenge, and we came to realize that this is becoming a bigger problem. So the big enterprise started decoupling that from the primary line. So when you Google or like search for DevSecOps or DevOps paradigms, you come to realize that most startups they do blog about a lot of the CI/CD experimentation that they have been going through. They come up with good blueprints that works for their scale. But if you're operating under a regulatory compliance, or if you're inside a big enterprise, a lot of you guys most likely going to be becoming, or either working for a big enterprise or like trying to become a big enterprise, because startups are very ambitious about that. The one-size-fits-all approach does not work for CI/CD. That's what we call one-size-fits-none happening all across organizations. So one thing that is very easy to identify, is we start naming it as DIY effect. So how many of you guys are creating your Docker files? Come on. Most likely 90% of you guys are creating Docker files. So it's very easy. You can watch a YouTube video that shows you how to create a Docker file or create a container image, right? It's a copy paste most of the times. You can go to Stack Overflow and copy paste something that's that has been there already, for a lot of other people as well. So I have been going through my home remodeling thing, and I have been watching a lot of YouTube videos on internet for DIY stuff, how to put the crown molding, how to do the remodeling in your kitchen and whatnot. It seems very easy, right? But once you start creating your own stuff, once you start working on that stuff, you come to realize that there are a lot of steps that can go wrong. Palo Alto has a unit called Unit 42. These guys are focusing on a lot of attacks that's happening or responding to attacks. 99% of the Kubernetes Helm charts have insecure configs. Public, usable Helm charts. It's very easy to create a Helm chart. Kubernetes manifests are very easy. 91% of the images on public registers, Docker Hub, Quay, you name it, have critical findings. If security is very easy, right, it should be very naturally, we should have at least 51% of those container images created in a proper manner, right? That's not what we have been seeing. If it seems easy, most likely you're just going to be overseeing something, oversimplifying stuff. Truth is rarely pure and never simple, right? Security is not that easy to integrate with your primary pipeline. So asking developers to integrate under the umbrella term we call shift left, asking developers to integrate security into their infrastructure is a mistake. So you have to have security people get more involved with development. That's what actual shift left should look like. So most people, when we talk about, like, hey, we are operating DevSecOps infrastructure, developers are primarily asking, hey, are we going to be able to deploy stuff or have root access to production infra? That's the other way around. The security folks should have direct access to the pipelines, the development steps of the pipeline. If you look at the conventional software development lifecycle, you will end up seeing like your code is either sitting in the source stage, that is, plain text, sitting in Git or Bitbucket repository or whatever, and then you build that into an artifact. That artifact becomes your binary, can be container image or jar file or war file that you can deploy to production, and you have the delivery stage, right? Delivery stage is like you deploy to your QA environment, dev environment, prod environment, whatever. So we have continuous integration pipeline, that's CI, and we have continuous delivery pipeline that spans all of those stages. So a continuous integration pipeline brings your source code into an artifact state, and over here, when you have that artifact build, you can do SCA, source composition analysis, which Artifactory, JFrog users have been doing already. But if you're in the source stage, you can still do the SBOM generation or static application security testing. In order for your dynamic application security testing, which is primary things for people who are operating DevSecOps infra, is to get your code into the delivery stage or application compiled and deployed somewhere. So you can do the DAST, dynamic application security testing, which we use Zap, we use Burp Suite, all other tools out there. But you have to get that through the pipeline. So these are typically executed by the same individual development teams that primarily owns that build steps, integration steps, and continuous delivery pipelines. But integrating SAST and DAST has been a challenge. So we came to realize that deploying a dedicated parallel pipeline, just focusing on the source stage, we call it security as code pipeline, and not ask the development teams to own it, owned by security folks only, just to create SAST findings or SBOM data has been very efficient. So you can create a completely decoupled pipeline that does security as code and looking into source stage without even talking to those the development teams. Completely decoupled. So by the advances, you might not know about these, but there's CNBs, Cloud Native Build Packs, or JIP or Co. These tools gives you ability to convert a source code to a container image. You don't need a Docker file. That's why I asked if you guys have been writing Docker files. I can, by reading a source code repository without a Docker file existing in that source code repository, convert that repository into a container image if that repository is in a buildable state. We don't need Docker file. So the end result is going to be container image. By having that policy as code pipeline, which we have been focusing on for a while, we can get the source code independent of all the CI/CD pipelines, get that convert to a container image. We can still do the SCA, source code analysis, and get that deployed to a DAST-only cluster. If it's a monorepo, it's very easy. If it's not monorepo, if you have multiple servers that needs to combine, you have to have some information over there. But all these steps, you don't need developer involvement whatsoever. One final anti-pattern thing that we have been observing, you guys, this is a very famous blog post from vWorks, and I love their stuff. You guys know the push versus pull model, right? Common model is that you have a service that is doing your response for your CI/CD stuff. Say it's a Jenkins server that has production credentials that lets it to deploy your artifacts, container images, or Helm charts, whatever, to your production infra. So you have that secret access credentials stored in your Jenkins to push your deployments. This is called push model. The pull model is you have an agent. It can be Tecton, it can be Argo, CD, it can be anything else that has been running inside your operator, inside your Kubernetes control plane, that has the credentials to your source control repository or container registry that pulls the code. The anti-pattern here is that everyone assumes that the right way to do this stuff is to have your Jenkins server to push the application. That should not be the case if you are under regulatory compliance, because your production credentials are going to be all over the place if you give them to your Jenkins server or any other CI/CD server. So we have seen a couple patterns over here, anti-patterns over here. Pull model is very important. You have to get your production credentials locked into your production zone and not leave anywhere else. The second one is security as code, SAST, DAST capabilities can be decoupled from the rest of the pipelines very quickly by the advances of like CMBs and other tools, and our policy as code like OPA policies. You can also get them deployed independent of the CI/CD steps. That's primarily a very 10,000-foot overview of what we have been working on. I'm just going to give the stage to Jeff so that he can go over a couple other slides. Go ahead.
We have the speaker notes?
Doesn't show you.
All right, so we're going to look at a couple of other, we'll call them myths, right? That DevOps teams can just do security. It's easy, right? We go buy a product, we turn it on, plug it in, right? Bunch of reasons that we found that we don't want to do this, okay? Scale, right? If you've got an organization who's managing your security tools for you, they can effectively negotiate contracts with your security vendors, right? You're not picking a different security tool for each team, or not allowing each team to pick their own individual security tools. You have centralized expertise on configuration management, deduplication of the findings that are coming out of that tool. And you have consistent results coming out of the tool, right? We'll touch on this again in a minute, but somebody in your organization is going to want to know that security is being done, especially if you've got any kind of compliance requirements, okay? The idea that pull requests are going to catch security issues, we need to think about who's doing your PRs, right? Is it your development teams? Are your development teams trained to spot those security issues, right? How many developers are going to know the difference between a timing-based SQL injection attack or a stored or reflected SQL injection? You know, some of these attacks get pretty deep, require a lot of expertise to understand, and these are the people that you're asking to select your security tools, right? Is SonarQube a security tool? Is Checkmarx, Coverity a suitable security tool? Right? Who's doing the compare and contrast, the feature evaluations, the configurations? Second point up here is developers generally don't enjoy doing code reviews. It's an inconvenience. It takes them away from the work that they want to be doing. Are they paying as much attention to it as they should be? Even many of the automated tools that run during a pull request on your GitHub Actions or your GitLabs, are going to overproduce on false positives. Who's been trained to weed out those false positives effectively? Devolves into what Kayra likes to call precision guesswork. Okay. Many organizations simply allow their developers to pull the open source projects that they want to use. Okay. Bad idea for a number of reasons here. Developers want quick wins. That's their motivations. Okay. They want something that they can plug in and move on to the next feature, and they can deliver the product as quickly as possible. Problem is they're not thinking about the impacts of licensing or the impacts of features, whether they're being used or not in that library or product. They're not thinking about the ongoing concerns that a security team may have, such as are the proper mailing lists being monitored? For instance, a show of hands, just who's using Jenkins, right? I would imagine it's a large portion of the crowd. How many of you know what version of Jenkins you're running on your production clusters? How many of you are following the security advisory's mailing list that says we've got a new exploit that's been found in Jenkins and there's a patch coming on Tuesday, right?
I don't want to interrupt, but security is not that easy, right? And I'm just going to give you a good example. If you have noticed, someone was presenting on this stage like 20 minutes ago with the Chrome screaming for "I need an update," red update on the upper right, and all these presentations that I've been attending as a speaker or like as an audience, like at least 20-30% of the Chrome browsers are screaming for an update. How hard it is to click that update button? It is not that hard, but we tend to ignore it. The maintaining that update is a challenge. If you are not OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, on that space, you're not going to be able to update it. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying that that's a mistake, but that's the typical human behavior. That's the anti-pattern. We have to have a dedicated team to update those stuff for you.
Or at least to raise the issue so that it can be updated, right? I mean, as a security team, we are not going to go in and update your libraries for you, if you're on development. But it definitely needs to be pointed out, right? Shift left is another one of those things that we hear, right? And all this is doing is moving security earlier into the pipeline. Not that that's a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, okay? But problem there is, to do security properly, it can take a long time, right? I mean, I know we've got some static code analysis that runs measured in days, right? We've got many that are measured in hours. This is not something that a development team is going to tolerate having run as part of their CI pipeline. Possibly, merging from dev to UAT or to release or to master, doing these selective scans, but then that's kicking it further to the right. You're not getting that feedback. And like I mentioned a few minutes ago, what about compliance, right? Somebody in your organization is going to want to know that security is being done. I have personally worked on development teams where I have had to go to the compliance organizations and certify that what we're doing maps to various control standards at least twice a year, right? And these engagements often run, a week or two at a time, and would pull me away as an architect from the team to defend what we were doing to ensure that the software was being built responsibly, right? So kind of the conclusion that we've come to is decoupling security from the CI pipeline is going to relieve many of these stress points. If you have a security organization within your business, ask your security team to do more development rather than having your developers do more security. Right? I know this is probably stealing Kayra's closing remark, but I truly believe in this. Right? Your developers simply aren't trained to evaluate, to configure, to run these tools, to keep the tools updated. If you can have a decoupled model that is not opt-in, it is not opt-out, it just runs, your organization's going to be in a much, much better place. Kayra?
Yeah, this might sound like, anti-DevOps or DevSecOps, because the core promise of DevOps, DevSecOps is breaking up silos, right? You try to merge or melt DevOps and security into one group of people, but there are certain specializations that needs to happen. Something that seems very easy, simple to implement, doesn't mean that you should be implementing it. And we have shown those examples. I don't want to give examples of anyone, but, a lot of corporate, enterprises have been running containers as Docker running as root. A lot of people have been adding an unnecessary number of dependencies to their container images. So these are not the best practices that you should be following. So if you ask developers to create a Docker file, which is the modern way of shipping applications, if you are asking them to own the security application scanning stuff, which is very simple, you just watch a YouTube video and get them implemented, you are not doing the right thing. Because asking developers to own that aspect of the operation is not the right approach. You should ask security conscious people, which have been the team that have been pushing for a while. Ask security folks to get more involved with developments. That's why decoupling security has to take place, right? Do not try to integrate all those SAST, SCA, numerous number of other steps that are security into the CI/CD pipeline. Split them, give them to a separate individual team that has more specialization in that area. Not because it's hard, but it needs specialized eye on that thing. And as you might have seen, this S-bombs, the SolarWinds, all these Ubers, Log4j, Apache, Text4Shell, Spring4Shell have been accelerating. The risk of getting hit by that type of vulnerability is only increasing. You cannot have enough dedicated developer resources to tackle that thing. One common anti-pattern that I can also mention, which we have not mentioned over here, is that we are trying to fix every single vulnerability by upgrading to the latest patch, which is an anti-pattern. You cannot win that war. That's not a winnable war. You cannot keep updating your applications Log4j 1 point something to 2 point something. The right way to do those type of stuff is prioritize it properly. I'm going to tell you a joke, which is very famous inside security, circles. But there is something called EPSS, Machine Learning Driven CV Prioritization System. It's called Exploitability Prediction Scoring System. So every day it changes. You give your CV. On that day, it's almost like weather. It shows you between 0 and 1, shows you 49% probability of that getting exploited. Focus on those EPSS score, high EPSS score ones. Do not try to fix anything. There's also another one, which is from CISA, CISA.gov. They publish exploited vulnerabilities. Just because there's a Log4j, that doesn't mean that's going to be exploited or registered as exploited. Try to focus on those. And the joke is inside the security folks that, these two guys goes to African Sahara. They start walking in the Sahara, and they have their running shoes and everything back in their backpack, and they see cheetah approaching them from the distance. And one of the guys starts running, which is like a Red Bull commercial, I guess. One of the guys starts running, and the other guy starts removing his backpack, putting his running shoes on, and the guy who started running first says, "Oh, do you think that you're going to be running faster than cheetah, which is the fastest animal on earth?" And the other guy who's putting his shoes on says, "I don't have to run faster than him. I need to run faster than you." Right? So you do not try to patch everything. That's the anti-pattern. That's your urge that you want to patch stuff very quickly, this is not going to work. You're just going to burn a lot of credits and not do anything meaningful. Use EPSS, use exploited vulnerability list. There's public data. Do not try to upgrade anything that you see that has to be upgraded. Prioritize according to your regulatory compliance requirements. I guess that's about it, right? Any questions? Cool. Did you guys like the memes? Ah, that's good. Thank you.